prep period for the last year. We recorded it last year, and it takes a long time to book the tour and get the sets and the clothes and rehearse and do the album cover and redesign the website and all of that. And now we're ready to go, so it feels really great. And
picture this. Bonnie Raitt, the flame-haired blues goddess of the 1970s, sits in a dimly lit studio surrounded by old records and fading memories. After years of silence, she finally speaks out about the 7 men who defined her generation, not through their music, but through their tangled web of charm, betrayal, and desire. They were the legends she sang with, drank with, and sometimes loved. But behind the guitars and glory were dark stories of obsession, jealousy, and broken promises. What she reveals isn't just gossip, it's the untold truth behind rock's most seductive faces. The first man on her list was someone who seemed to embody both tenderness and turmoil. Jackson Browne was the golden boy of California's folk rock scene, and for a time, Bonnie was drawn to his intensity. Their connection was immediate and consuming, 2 artists who understood each other's language of longing and pain. But behind Jackson's soulful eyes lurked turbulence. His charm hid a volatile spirit, one fueled by ambition and haunted by ego. Fame became his poison, turning love into rivalry, tenderness into storm. They argued as fiercely as they adored, their nights swinging between laughter and heartbreak. Jackson's temper could flare like a match, leaving Bonnie to pick through the ashes of promises made in candlelight. The same passion that gave life to his songs also burned through their bond. When it ended, it wasn't with words, but with silence, a wound that hummed beneath every chord she played. In time, Bonnie realized that his brilliance was both gift and curse, and that some hearts, no matter how luminous, carry storms too wild to love. But the next man she encountered was something entirely different, a soulmate whose brilliance was shadowed by addiction. Lowell George of Little Feat was Bonnie's musical twin, playful, witty, and endlessly talented, a kindred spirit wrapped in mischief and melody. Their bond was born in smoky bars and late-night studios, where they traded guitar licks and secrets over tumbling laughter and cheap whiskey. Together, they lived on rhythm and instinct, chasing the kind of freedom only music could offer. But addiction stalked Lowell like a relentless ghost. As his talent soared, so did his dependence. Bonnie watched the man she admired slip further into a world of exhaustion and excess, his brilliance blurring into chaos. She tried to help him, offering kindness where others turned away, but love could not compete with the pull of his demons. Nights that began in laughter often ended in silence and regret.
well, we knew eventually, we hoped that it would end up, that people would do the right thing and so we could get safe, and they figured out a vaccine. So the horizon was clearing, and I just was frustrated.
When he died young in 1979, it left a wound she carried for years, a haunting reminder of how thin the line was between genius and destruction. She poured her grief into her songs, every chord echoing his spirit. In her performances, you could still feel him there, his ghost lingering between verses, a bittersweet whisper of what could have been. And then came the guitar god himself, one whose soul was as fractured as his melodies were perfect. Bonnie admired Eric Clapton long before they met. To her, he was the embodiment of everything both beautiful and broken about the blues. When their worlds finally collided, the chemistry was electric. Two guitarists with the same ache in their music and the same loneliness in their hearts. But beneath that spark lay chaos. Clapton lived in a loop of addiction, guilt, and self-destruction, and every time Bonnie tried to reach him, he slipped further into the shadows. They shared the stage, laughter, and sometimes the same bed, but she could feel the storm beneath his calm. He was gentle one moment, haunted the next. Behind every tender look was a man fighting ghosts she couldn't name. For all his talent, Clapton was at war with himself, his music his only confession, his addictions his only escape. Their bond burned fast, full of passion and despair, a collision between two souls who understood pain too deeply to ever find peace together. When it ended, it left behind silence and the kind of sorrow that only music could translate. The next encounter would come decades later, yet it carried the same dangerous spark, the younger reflection of an old pattern. Though he came later, John Mayer's womanizing ways reminded Bonnie of every man she'd survived in the 70s. When they met backstage decades later, she felt a jolt of déjà vu, the smirk, the easy charm, the glint of arrogance hidden behind a boyish grin. He was talented, magnetic, and endlessly restless, the kind of man who could make a woman feel seen for a moment and forgotten the next. They talked about music, life on the road, and the chaos that comes with fame. Bonnie could see the same hunger for affection and the same fear of stillness that once haunted the men of her generation. Mayer, in all his brilliance and bravado, was a reflection of that old, dangerous energy, a living echo of the rock world's eternal loop. For Bonnie, he was proof that the patterns never really die, they just find new faces to wear them. But the next name on her list was one even the world couldn't look away from, the most magnetic man in rock and the most dangerous of all. Mick Jagger embodied the wild, reckless energy of the 70s like no one else. To Bonnie, he was the ultimate contradiction, charming and cruel, magnetic and manipulative. They met on the festival circuit where nights blurred into music, laughter, and temptation. He could light up an entire room with a glance, his presence intoxicating. For a while, Bonnie was drawn in by his swagger, his wit, his sense of danger. But behind that magnetic grin was a man addicted to control. Jagger played with people the way he played with melodies, masterfully, but never tenderly. He collected women like trophies, feeding off adoration, but never giving real affection. Their flirtation danced on the edge of romance, full of fire and deceit. To Bonnie, he became a living symbol of everything intoxicating and hollow about fame, a man who could own the world on stage but lose himself once the music stopped. When the lights faded, all that remained was emptiness, and the echo of applause that could never fill the silence inside him. Then came the wild card, the poet of chaos whose life was a song of beauty and ruin. Warren Zevon was chaos wrapped in poetry, a brilliant storm that both dazzled and destroyed. His sharp wit and dangerous charm drew Bonnie in like a moth to a flame. They spent long nights trading verses and half-drunk laughter, two kindred souls finding beauty in the broken. Yet beneath his humor lay deep pain, an anger that burned hotter than his talent could contain. He was unpredictable, tender one moment, volatile the next. Their connection blurred the lines between friendship and love, but his addictions soon took control. Bonnie watched helplessly as alcohol became his companion and music his only salvation. She tried to pull him back, but Zevon lived on his own terms, reckless, brilliant, and doomed. When he died, she grieved not just for him, but for the whole generation he symbolized, artists consumed by the very fire that made them shine. To her, Warren was a reminder that genius without peace always ends in tragedy, and that sometimes the brightest lights burn out far too soon. And yet, before all the heartbreak, there had been one man who had shown her what it meant to love the blues and live it fully, the rebel who started it all. Paul Butterfield, the gritty harmonica player who helped define Chicago blues, was one of Bonnie's earliest inspirations and one of her hardest lessons. Their connection began on smoky stages where music bled into midnight and laughter mingled with whiskey. They shared a bond forged in rhythm and rebellion, both outsiders chasing something real in an industry built on illusion. Bonnie admired his raw fire, the way every note from his harmonica seemed torn from his soul, but with that brilliance came chaos. Butterfield lived like he played, fast, fierce, and without restraint. He was magnetic, yet self-destructive, charming and cruel in equal measure. One night he would make the room tremble with his music. The next he'd vanish into the haze of drugs and despair. Bonnie saw the toll the endless touring, the fame, and the loneliness took on him. He pushed people away even as he begged not to be abandoned. Their friendship became a painful mirror of the blues itself, beautiful, aching, and doomed. When Butterfield finally succumbed to addiction, Bonnie felt the loss like a wound. She understood then that not all heroes survive their own sound, and that even the greatest melodies can end in silence. When Bonnie Raitt finally spoke about these men, her voice trembled with the weight of memory, half sorrow, half fire. They were the architects of a wild generation, the kings of passion and ruin. Each one left fingerprints on her soul, some gentle, some bruising. They inspired the songs that defined her, but also the nights that nearly destroyed her. The 1970s had promised liberation, but behind the free love and revolution were women carrying the emotional wreckage that fame left behind. As the years passed, Bonnie Lear knew that these stories weren't about blame, but survival. She had witnessed genius crumble under addiction, ego, and fear. She had loved men who mistook chaos for creativity and pain for depth. Yet from every heartbreak she drew a new kind of strength. Her music became a sanctuary, a place where she turned betrayal into ballad and sorrow into something sacred. Each note carried the ghosts of those she lost, but also the proof that she endured. Now, with time as her witness, Bonnie stands unbroken. The womanizers of the 70s may have left trails of destruction, but she transformed their darkness into melody. Every scar became a lyric, every silence a song. When the stage lights fade and the crowd disappears, she remains, the voice of resilience, the keeper of truths too raw for anyone else to tell. Her story is not one of heartbreak, but of reclamation, the triumph of a woman who turned every wound into power and every memory into music that will never die.